Hello, and today we're going to be looking at some of the images we've taken on our dog photography workshop shot recently of the beautiful model Indy, who did incredibly well. Lots of treats, lots of cuddles, and was very obedient the entire time. Couldn't have asked for a better model for that night. Was absolutely fantastic. So these are just a couple of images. Our attendees shot a lot more than I got to that evening. But I thought we'll just hop onto Lightroom and have a look at how we're going to process some of these images. Now, the ones I'm going to focus on are these ones at the end here. And I think I quite like this second one because that's a very happy pup, isn't it? That's a very happy dog. And I think that's a really nice shot. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a look. Now, as usual, I like to start with my crop. Visualizing the final image just helps me. And I see this as a square. So I'm going to take this to my 1:1 ratio at the side. And I'm going to pull this in and I'm going to put those eyes roughly on that third there, a little bit of a tilt. And I think that's quite cute. I like that. I'm going to come out of my crop and I think that's lovely. Now, we had an overhead light, and as you can see on the fur here, we are perfectly exposed. Everything's beautiful. However, we were working with white fur as well. So we have a little bit that is close to being blown out. And the first thing we're going to do, because we've got white fur, that would be a highlight. We're just going to pull our highlights down. So let's pull those highlights all the way down, and suddenly we're getting all that texture come back. And then I'm going to combat that by putting my shadows up, and we've got a lot more detail coming through now. We can see a lot more texture. We can see all of that fur coming in as well. So I've got my detail back. I can also do that by using a mask if I want to. So let's say that I'm going to bring this back in. Let's say I like the contrast of the rest of the image. I'm going to go grab a mask, grab a brush, and I'm going to draw on here, and I'm going to pull my highlights down, and I can control how much we're doing that. Pull my exposure down if I really want to take it. We've got the white section we can pull a bit more. We just don't want it to go grey. That is what we are avoiding here. We definitely don't want it to go grey. And now you can see actually the bridge of the nose has gone a bit darker than the forehead. So I'm going to work for the bridge, and then I can always tone that forehead down a little bit more if I want to. But I think that's done a good job. That's looking nice. So now how can we enhance this image? It's a lovely image. We had a light on the background for the spotlight. We had Indy looking straight at us, who was very nice and slobbery by that point because we had a lot of treats. And basically, what can we do to make this image pop? What can we do to make it stand out? Now, for me, it's a warm tone image. So I want to keep it warm toned. So I'm going to actually up my white balance a little bit more here. And I think I'm also going to really draw us in. I want to add a bit of a vignette coming round too. So I'm going to do that with a mask. Anyone who's watched my videos, you know I prefer doing this with a mask. I'm going to pull around here and I'm going to change this. Now what this does, it changes the amount of feathering between. Now currently the mask is on Indy's face. So if I go to make this darker, it's going to make Indy's face darker. But if I just tick the little invert button there, it's going to flip that round. And all of a sudden, I've got a really nice vignette that I've controlled. Now, I'm going to feather that a little bit less, but I'm actually going to warm up those shadows a little bit more as well, really pushing that image out. I think that's going to look absolutely lovely and give us a much more nice focused image onto Indy. Now, I think this head has gone up a little bit bright again, so I'm going to do a second measurement just onto this bit here. Going to pull those highlights down even further, pull those warm tones up, and I'm actually going to pull down a tiny little bit on my exposure just to control, and I'm a lot happier with that. We're not going to be noticing that as much, so that's perfect. So let's get rid of that one. Now, I think we're focused in on Indy. That's absolutely lovely. I like to do what I call dog contour. And what it is, it just enhances certain features, eyebrows, nose, cheekbones, but you don't want to make them look too skinny. So I will again be doing this with a brush. I will be adding a brush and I will just be using a feathered brush, just kind of go over the little areas like eyebrows and just ever so slightly pull the exposure up onto there. Make my brush smaller, go over the tip of the nose, a little bit there, just adds a little bit. And then I can add anything that I want to shine a tiny bit, I can draw in. These are very subtle. It shouldn't be doing too much. Let's bring that in there. And you can see it's just raised those little bits, which I think is looking quite nice. So last thing I want to do, I'm going to actually enhance Indy's eyes a tiny bit. So I'll zoom in for us on here. And what we'll do is we'll create, we can do select people, but at this point Lightroom is not selecting dogs, so we're going to have to manually do the eyes for Indy here. I'm just going to draw around just the colours on the eyes. We don't want to get the inner pupil. There we go. And all I'm going to do is up my highlights, which can add a little bit, up my exposure a tiny bit, and add contrast. By adding contrast, we're adding a little bit of texture in there, and I think that's looking quite nice. We can actually play around with the eye colour should we want to, and pump up the eye colour a little bit more. That's not something I'd usually do. I don't normally need to add that much, but I think that's looking quite nice. So let's have a comparison. Let's look at our before and after. So before, our image was quite lovely. I think it was quite vibrant, but now I think it's got a real punch. It's got a real vibe to it. The last thing that I might look at doing before finishing with this image is my color grading. I do love my color grading. This image doesn't really need it. It's already got some beautiful, rich colors, but let's have a play for the fun of it. I'm going to bring my oranges in, and I'm going to actually just pull that up a tiny bit on the luminance just to lift those. Now, anything in my highlights is going to affect these white areas. As you might be able to see, they've just gone a little bit blue. So I'm actually going to stay with the complementary colours here of the yellows and the oranges, and pull those down a little bit more. Pull those shadows down a bit. And I quite like that. It's added a little bit of something to the colour. I like the texture it was before though, but I do enjoy my colour grading. So I think that's looking quite nice. In fact, I'm going to pull that down a tiny bit. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So yeah, I think that looks great. I absolutely really love that. And if we again go to the before, have a look to the after, quite different. All edited in Lightroom. My next stage would be going into Photoshop. I might be editing some of this dribble out. I do look for the odd hair. On some days, a hair like this might annoy me. On other days, it might not. And I'll take out anything that needs to, any sort of little marks and whatever. But overall, I like my dog images to be quite real. I don't like to do too much. I don't like me saying not about editing the eye colour. All I want to do is control those tones, and really see the character of that dog. So thank you for joining me. I hope this has been helpful, and we'll see you next time.